Today, this evening, I welcome you all, audience here in this one of the present evening. Uh, the at the outside, I'm thankful to the CCI and Dr. Krishna giving me this opportunity to interact with you. This is one of the important subject related to the COVID. The cytokine storm during the COVID, the Chakravyuh. Friends, I am having very eminent panel with me today to discuss this important subject with you. My first panelist is Dr. Parvez Kaul. He's one of the top chest physician of the Kashmir from the Kashmir, and he is presently chief editor of the Lung India, one of the very prestigious journal of the respiratory medicine in country. My second panelist is Dr. Indrajit Haldar from Kolkata. He is again a chest physician and a professor in the Calcutta Medical College and very eminent chest physician from the Kolkata. Dr. Kumar Utsav, he is from Varanasi. He is a emerging chest physician, rather I better call him. He has been involved in a large number of the patient COVID treatment in Varanasi city. He has been spearheading the fight to the COVID in Varanasi city. Dr. Tony is from Kerala. He has been, I know him last for a few days, and Dr. Srijan Nair from the Mumbai. So I welcome all, and I request you to play my presentation now. Friends, at the outset, I'm thankful to Dr. Krishna and CCI for giving me this opportunity this evening to interact with you. Last year, especially last few months, have been absolutely unprecedented and unbelievable tough times for our country. Such kind of scenario which we have never seen in our life, and we don't wish to see it again. I don't think there must be any family in the country which has not suffered the pain from this COVID disaster. We have never seen such an helpless time for healthcare professionals, which with all our skill and dedication at our hand, we are not able to save as many lives as we could otherwise. Non-availability of the adequate ICU facility, non-availability of the hospital beds, non-availability of the medications, non-availability of the oxygen were important factor for this cause. That because I have seen people dying in front of the hospital for want of the oxygen, for want of the hospital, for want of the drugs. And even in our city, the nebulization machine was just not available. In our city, even the pulse oximeter was just not available. Even the paracetamol goli was a short supply. Vitamin C, vitamin zinc was also short supply. So it was a very difficult time for all of us. It is my strong belief that if sufficient availability of the ICU beds, oxygen and medicine were ensured in time, the mortality could have been reduced to more than 50%. Friends, with this small remark, we move on to the small part, my small presentation, introduction of the subject, cytokine storm during the COVID-19, the Chakravyuh. Friends, the cytokine storm is, what is cytokine storm is? So the cytokine storm is a systemic expression of the severe immune reaction resulting in the release of the more than 150 known inflammatory mediators, which are mainly pro-inflammatory mediators, oxygen-free radicals, and coagulation factors into the blood too quickly. Cytokine plays important role into normal immune responses, but having a large amount of them released in the body at once may be harmful. What is the definition of this? What is the definition of the term cytokine? The term cytokine was first coined in 1991, and in fact, cytokine has so far it was to describe the hypercytokinemia in one of the host versus allogenic host versus blood stem cell transplant patient. In fact, cytokine has storm has no accepted definition. Some of the expert defined it. Some of the expert defined it as a specific clinical phenotypes having the following features: immune dysregulated, characterized by the immune dysregulation characterized by the continuous activation of the lymphocyte and macrophages. It results into the secretion of large quantities of cytokines, leading to the overwhelming systemic inflammation and multi-organ failure and high mortality. These are the important factors to recognize first. The important fact is that still it is unclear that what factors influence this transmission from normal physiological immune response to the pathogenic hyperinflammatory response. The cause is not known. And this is one figure with what we call COVID pathogenesis or COVID disease, about COVID disease, which we have seen, we are seeing, and every presentation of the COVID disease. The first stage one is the early infection phase, viral phase, what we call viral phase. Stage 2 is a pulmonary phase, stage 3 is the hyperinflammatory. The 80% patient becomes all right after the early phase only, stage 1 only. Only 20% move to 20%, almost 20% patient move to the stage 2, out of which the only 5 to 3% patient, 3 to 5% patient move to this phase, stage 3, which is a hyperinflammatory stage, is a difficult stage in fact. Each stage where the patient needs to shift to the ARDS, needs to be shifted to the ICU care and hypoxia. To treat the hypoxia, ultimately patient develop the higher multi-organ dysfunction, and death is the important cause. Death ultimately resulted with the death of the patient. Friends, about how to diagnose this cytokine storm in the patient. There is no standard criteria for making the diagnosis associated with cytokine storm. The following criteria may suggest the presence of the cytokine storm in a COVID patient. A sudden rapid progression with multiple organ involvement, such as liver, kidney, and liver, heart, and renal injuries, which may be there, by which we can judge by biomarkers of these organs. And once these are present, we can suspect that probably patient is having the cytokine storm is upcoming. The significant decline in the peripheral blood lymphocyte count, again very important factor which may responsible, which may indicate presence of the cytokine storm. The significant elevation of the systemic inflammatory indicators such as the CRP, serum ferritin, and ERS, at times presence of these indicators again show us that give us criteria that give us a focus that probably our patient is going for the cytokine storm. The elevation of the multiple cytokines such as the interleukin 1, interleukin 2, interleukin 6, and gamma interferon and tumor necrosis factor may indicate presence of the cytokine storm. So clinician should keep highly alert. One should be very careful. Once your patient is admitted in the stage 2 in your hospital, you should be careful about these parameters. When they come, patient immediately should be shifted to ICU care, and a specific treatment should be started at the earliest. However, cytokine storm is a highly heterogeneous disease. Patient may present with the non-specific symptoms. Patient at times present with the diarrhea, and at times present with the headache, at times present with the vomiting also may present in the cytokine storm. So it is a heterogeneous disease, may present in any form at times. So how to diagnose? As per the mechanism of the cytokine storm is concerned, it is very simple. Though it is a very simple oversimplification of the very complicated mechanism of the COVID-19 disease. The COVID-19, the virus, COVID viruses enter into the lungs through the aerosols and attaches itself to the receptors, COVID receptors, which are the SE2 receptors, and immediately shifted to the endothelial lining through the bloodstream. And as soon as it reaches to the endothelial lining, there is a immune response starts. There is signals produced by the immune response which activate the cells, dendritic cells, monocytes, and macrophages to produce cytokines. Once this cytokine produced is under the limits, it may not cause any harm. It is beneficial to have immune response. But once a dysregulated response is there, an excess amount of the cytokine, a massive amount of cytokines is being produced, it is harmful and lead to the cytokine storm, and which ultimately responsible for cause of the death of the patient. Friends, as for the drug treatment of the cytokine storm is concerned, I will not go details of the drug treatment here because which we are going to talk in question and answer session. But important thing is immunomodulated drug in the form of cytokine storm, in the form of corticosteroid, and main drug are the main drugs are the cytokine inhibitor drugs. And SUQ therapy was one of the popular treatment at one point of time, but now it is no more used as far the treatment of the COVID disease is concerned. Many other new monoclonal antibodies is being under development, and many other new drugs are different phase of the time. I hope that when the third wave is there, we will prepare for many other drugs at our hand to deal with this type of the problem. Friends, inflammation is an essential part of the effective immune system. It is difficult to eliminate infection successfully without inflammation. However, COVID infection induces excessive prolonged cytokine responses in some of the patients. Some of the individuals that some of the patient of the COVID disease, the cytokine storm causes ARDS, multiple organ dysfunction, which leads to the physiological deterioration and death. Timely control of the cytokine storm is an early stage is one of the very important part of the doctor's responsibility. Through an early, how can we diagnose an early? How can we recognize? Through an early recognition of the COVID presence of cytokine storm, so we can do the early interference, early introduction of the treatment in the form of immunomodulated drugs and cytokine antagonist, and by providing the supportive care. As soon as there is some indication that cytokine storm is upcoming, probably you need to shift the patient to the ICU care, and a supportive treatment immediately should be started. These are the key factors: improving the treatment success rate, and reducing the mortality rate of the patients of the COVID-19. Friends, my important message to the chest physician, because chest physicians are the only doctors who are in the field to fight this disease. Be an Arjun bano or break karo is chakravyuh ko. Be Arjun and break this chakravyuh developed by the cytokine storm by making an early diagnosis. It is in your hand, and you should be carefully recognize the patient that as soon as you see some factors are coming up, some indication are coming up, you immediately start the treatment and shift to the patient to the ICU. Early initiation of the treatment is mainly in the form of corticosteroid and giving the best supportive care in the ICU, treating the hypoxia, treating the other complication. I think with this, I'll stop here and we'll move to the second part of this session. Thank you. Friends, you just listened one of the description of the COVID, this or cytokine storm due to the COVID infection. This cytokine storm and dysregulated what we are listening for last 1.5 years now. My first question goes to Dr. Parvez. Dr. Parvez, what is cytokine storm and what is means by this immune dysregulation? So what is there any connection between these two?
Thank you, Professor Samaria, sir, and thank you, CCI, for having me as a part of this important panel discussion to discuss something which has been of a very huge importance to all of us involved in the management of COVID. Cytokine storm is something that we've been knowing since the times of influenza, since the times of CAR-T therapy, leukemias, or even the stem cell transplantation, as Professor Samaria so beautifully explained. So it's basically an umbrella term which encompasses several disorders of immune dysregulation, which are characterized by constitutional symptoms, systemic inflammation, and multi-organ dysfunction, which can be severe enough to result in multi-organ failure if not adequately treated. And the onset and duration varies, and the various inflammatory changes can be discernible either on the clinical examination or in the laboratory. So constitutional symptoms like fever, anorexia, fatigue, and then there can be dysfunctions of various other organ systems, be it the lungs, be it the liver, be it the kidneys, be it the nervous system, be it the heart or gastrointestinal system or the skin. And then concurrent with this, there are laboratory evidences, as Sir said, of elevated cytokines, as well as evidences of increased markers of inflammation, be it hyperferritinemia, be it an increase in CRP, be it an increase in the dimers, or cytopenias, coagulopathy, and then this can degenerate over a period of time into a severe form of multi-organ dysfunction, which can result in organ failures and eventually ARDS and shock, and death has also been reported.
Dr. College for so enlightening statement related to the cytokine storm and immune dysregulation. My second question goes to the eminent chest physician, my close friend, Dr. Indraneel. Dr. Indraneel, we have been listening the cytokine storm right from 1991. This term is used for the first time in 1991. So what are the other causes of besides the COVID infection? We are just finding it one of the deadly things to happen to us. So what are the other causes of the cytokine storm?
So thank you, sir, for the kind introduction. And again, thanks to the CCI for bringing me here. So if we see, sir, from the historical perspective, so cytokine storm was referred to as influenza-like syndromes, and it was dated long back, even when the plague was there in the major pandemic that triggered alveolar macrophages to produce excessive amounts of cytokine and cytokine storm. It has also been seen in the 1918-1919 influenza pandemic. So a host of disorders have been described to cause cytokine storms, which target immune-directed therapy, such as in sepsis. Even if you see some genetic conditions like primary and secondary hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, that is HLH, that is now commonly called, in some auto-inflammatory and autoimmune disease, just like Still's disease in juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, even in lupus, where in that context, the cytokine storm is often referred to as the macrophage activation syndrome. So it is also seen in some major human coronavirus, in influenza A, as Dr. Parvez Kaul has already told, a subtype outbreak which has occurred in the past 2 decades with H5N1, and in the MERS and the SARS, and in even some other viruses like Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus virus. So other causes has also been highlighted by Dr. Kaul when he told that in the therapy of leukemia, the CAR-T therapy, there were some cytokine storms. In immunotherapy, some of the immunotherapy also causes cytokine storms. Medical situations that may be seen after an organ or a stem cell transplant. In certain cancers also, we have seen cytokine storm, and also in conditions that affect the immune system like AIDS. So this is what ultimately some of the causes which may cause cytokine storm.
Very elaborative answer. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Indraneel. My next question goes to the Dr. Kumar, also a dynamic chest physician from the Varanasi. Dr. So, we are listening about the increase in cytokine level in a patient of the COVID. Whether it is always harmful or it is beneficial at times.
We have to understand the fact that, in the body, there are always a level of homeostasis maintained by these cytokines. They are protective. These are in normal situations of protective bodies protective antibodies in the body. So in mild to moderate cases, there is this homeostasis inside the body is not disturbed. There is a low expression of this inflammatory cytokine with an increased tissue reparative growth factors like EGF, like PDGF, like IL-7. All these factors maintain this low inflammatory state in mild to moderate cases. It maintains a balance. So that is actually beneficial. But in severe cases, the factors like there is a high elevation of this pro-inflammatory cytokines like IL-1 alpha, IL-1 beta, interferon gamma, IL-6, IL-18 and TNF-alpha. These lead to a sustained TNF alpha and IL-6 production, which leads and severe lymphopenia, which leads to a deficient immunodeficient state in the body, and hence that is how we have to understand the formation of cytokine storm in severe cases, and in mild cases these are actually beneficial.
In fact, you're right. It is beneficial when it is not massive. It is regulated. Once it is dysregulated, it is harmful.
Yeah.
So my next question goes to another dynamic chest physician from the Kerala, Dr. Tony. You tell us that what are the important cells involved in the production of the cytokines, which is responsible for causing the cytokine storm.
At the outset, sir, I would like to thank Dr. Krishna sir and Dr. Narayana sir for the opportunity to be with this esteemed panel for such an important topic discussion. And as your talk itself had in the initial presentation has shown us, the issue we face is that our body is trying to protect us from an external infection. So the problem is that our years and millions of years of evolution, we have so many pathways of immunoprotection and modulation that get activated at different levels when a pathogen enters the body. For example, the most important point for us with the SARS-CoV infection is the airway. Where the pathogen, the SARS-CoV virus, enters the airway. The moment, as we know, a virus cannot do anything by itself. It needs to enter a cell, utilize the cell, replicate within the cell, reproduce, and then spread to the next cell. So the problem coming is when it goes into the cell, the first thing is the cell that gets infected, initially itself our macrophages, monocytes, and neutrophils get activated. The macrophages are of the habit of engulfing the pathogen and trying to subsidize and to kill it. But when the problem coming is, as that reaction activates, now if your immunity is quite good, if the macrophage and the initial line of defense, that is our innate immunity, is stimulated good enough, the pathogen is destroyed there itself and we don't develop the infection. But here what happens, what we see is that probably when we even compare the first wave and to the second wave, initially there were not much symptoms for the people. But now we come out with more symptoms. So the problem coming is that the infection is able to bypass this regulation, and when the macrophage gets overstimulated, after that it starts releasing cytokines. As our previous doctors have just spoken, there are almost more than 40 types of interleukins that come out and try to stimulate the immunity to fight against this pathogen. The issue coming is, along with the macrophages, there are T helper cells, there are neutrophils, there are B cells, there are NK cells, there are gamma delta T cells, and dendritic cells. When everything starts cascading and stimulating each other, it causes a very hyper immune response situation. And along with that, when this goes beyond a certain limit, we reach where the TNF cytokines stimulate they activate the cytotoxic T cells. That is where the end damage starts, because the cytotoxic T cells will try to destroy the original human cell that is harboring the viral cell. So when that happens, that is where the end organ damage starts, and we see the worsening stage of the disease because the body itself starts to harm itself. So the basic problem with the different treatment modalities is we don't have, for example, when we try to correct the IL-6 factor we talked about, we don't control all the other factors also stimulating. Now a steroid way of treatment usually will hamper a bit of these. So the problem is at which point you implement which drug for an optimum correction of the problem at that point of time. So that is why we have to know the pathways, most importantly, know where to apply which medication. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your elaborative answer. Probably you covered everything related to cytokines. My next question goes to you. Dr. Shrija, you want to add what Dr. Tony said regarding this function of the cytokines?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. First of all, I would also like to thank the CCI and Dr. Krishna and Dr. Narayana, sir. I'm Dr. Shrija. I will be answering this question related to the cytokines. I think Tony already described most of it, but he told us about the cells that are important in releasing these cytokines. So we have two major types of cytokines: the pro-inflammatory cytokines and the regulatory cytokines. So the pro-inflammatory cytokines are the causative agents of the cytokine storm, and they have a negative feedback on them by regulatory cytokines such as IL-10 and antagonists of the IL receptor and Treg cells. So when you have a continuous stimulation of and production of these cytokines, which are namely the IL-1, IL-6, IL-17, IL-18, the tumor necrosis factor, and the interferon gamma, which Samaria sir has already described nicely in the presentation. So each of these cells, each of these interleukins, what they do is they bind to a receptor. For example, IL-1 binds to the IL-1R A or B receptor, and you have IL-6 that has an IL-6 receptor, and then they combine to form a complex. For example, IL-6 combines with the GP, membrane-bound glycoprotein 130, and they form this complex. And after this, there's a cascade of activation of intracellular signaling that happens. This happens so that you see at the nuclear level, transcription translation takes place, and further there's this cascade of events produces more pro-inflammatory cytokines and triggers more influx of neutrophils and the T cells and macrophages. So there are main four pathways, the intracellular signaling that we have to know about, because there are medicines that the treatment that we give work on these pathways. So you have the JAK-STAT pathway, which is one of the most important. That is the Janus kinase signal transducing activation and pathway, signal transduction and activation of transcription pathway. You have the mTOR pathway. You have the NF-kB pathway, which is a nuclear factor kappa beta pathway through which basically steroids work. So intracellular signal transduction happens through these pathways, and this leads to basically the effects of cytokine storm. There's no the negative feedback is gone here. So we have continuous production of these cytokines. So you have cytokines such as IL-1, IL-6, and tumor necrosis factor, which are pyrogens, and they're very strong pro-inflammatory cytokines, and cause a procoagulant effect. They cause influx of more neutrophils. Basically, they activate the Th1 hyper-responsiveness that causes the damage. And as Tony has described, in the end, all this leads to multi-organ dysfunction. It may be in the lungs, it may be in the lungs, it may be in the kidney, it may be in the liver, the CNS. All systems could be involved, and this leads to the final damage of multi-organ failure. So I hope this is enough.
Dr. Shrija, very elaborative answer. Again,
Thank you so much.
So my next question goes to Dr. Indranil. Dr. Indranil, tell us that how and why this regulated response becomes dysregulated and causes the cytokine storm. It's a very difficult type of the situation created. So why? Because regulated immune response is helpful to the patient, and dysregulated immune response is harmful. So why and how this problem comes out?
So thank you, sir. This is in continuation what Tony and Srija just rightly told now. In fact, they have already told the mechanism. In short, what I will tell is that, just in short, the virus primarily attacks the airway and the alveolar epithelial cells, the vascular endothelial cells also, and macrophages, and expresses the ACE2, which is the host target. So the ACE2 expression in the lungs is downregulated, which causes the lung injury and dysfunction of the renin-angiotensin system. So there is inflammatory programmed cell death seen with this cytopathic virus, which is associated with the vascular leakage, trigger subsequent local inflammatory response, and this involves secretion of pro-inflammatory cytokines, which are a lot of there, which include the IL-1 beta, IL-6, INF gamma, and MCP1, and a lot other that is already been discussed. What is happening in most of the cases that the inflammatory reaction ameliorates the pulmonary infection, which helps in recovery of the patients. But in a few, a dysfunctional immune response occurs, which is referred to as the cytokine storm, or the cytokine release syndrome, as it is often called, which triggers an exaggerated release of the cytokines, released to widespread pulmonary inflammation and lung damage via secretion of the protease, the free radicals. There is discommission of the alveolar cells, hyaline membrane formation, and edema. There is ultimately limiting gas exchange in the lungs, leading to difficulty in all those breathing, hypoxemia, and the lungs is also susceptible to secondary infection, causing the multi-organ damage in the lungs, the kidney, heart, and everywhere. And this is what the cytokine storm takes in. and ultimately developing ARDS and multi-organ failure, and ultimately the patient may succumb. So this is what is happening, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Indranil, for your again very clear-cut pathogenesis of the cytokine storm. Now, my next question comes to Dr. Parvez. Dr. Parvez, we are having this severe COVID patient which are ultimately going, many of them are ultimately going to the cytokine storm. So, how to investigate such type of the patients? What are the battery of investigation which is required for such just to know that this particular patient is may undergo or imminent type of the cytokine storm is there, so we can act upon it very early.
So it's very site specific and geography specific, because some areas, some may have access to the investigations and some may not have. However, what I'm going to talk about is an ideal situation where we have possibility of getting the investigations. First, we need to know that the patient really has COVID. So we need to get an RT-PCR. We must have it available with us. Then get an assessment of the oxygenation status by doing a pulse oximetry and arterial blood gas analysis, which should be done in all patients with who are suspected to have a cytokine storm. Then we do a CBC to document a lymphopenia, NLR ratio. We also want to find out if there is any leukocytosis, leukopenias, thrombocytopenias, or even decreased eosinophils, and even a reduced hemoglobin. Then we also do a comprehensive metabolic panel, which would include getting an assessment of the liver function tests, getting an assessment of the renal function tests, and trying to find out if there is any evidence of an accompanying dysfunction of these. A glucose level has got to be available in order to find, because we know that hyperglycemia has been independently associated with a poor prognosis in patients with severe COVID disease. Then we need to get a coagulation screen, which would mean a level of fibrinogen and FDP and a D-dimer, and those have all been associated variously with severe COVID. Cardiac biomarkers are important. We need to get NT-proBNP, cardiac troponin levels if and when available. We also get an idea about the serum inflammatory markers, like we do a C-reactive protein, or we do ferritin levels. We can get an ESR, as you said in your presentation. We can get an idea about the cell death or the tissue death by doing a lactic dehydrogenase level. We can do serum interleukin level, which is a surrogate of various other cytokines that can be elevated, like all the panelists said, that we are talking of a high cytokine level in the form of pro-inflammatory cytokines and a reduced release of interleukin 10 and other IL-2 receptors. Then we also do serum procalcitonin can be done in patients in order to rule out, or even though it is not absolute, but you get an idea about a bacterial infection which might be superimposed, which might necessitate a antibacterial therapy in patients with COVID. We do get serum ferritin levels. In some cases, if there is availability, we may get serum amyloid levels, and they might also be elevated in patients who have a cytokine storm. Then we get the renal functions. We do blood cultures and sputum cultures as appropriate, and in times we might have to resort to other cultures that we routinely do in our intensive care patients. Then we also get imaging, which may be restricted to a X-ray of the chest, or then we might require to get a HRCT, or as and when required, depending on that. And serology is being said by certain investigators to be useful if you do not have a clear evidence of an RT-PCR. That may be a surrogate of a previous infection if you have an antibody which is positive. And that is pretty much what we order in. So we have evidence of a disease, evidence of a lung involvement and a respiratory dysfunction, and then evidence of hyperinflammation and elevation of the cytokines.
Dr. Parvez, very informative answer. And it is really a masterly stroke.
Thank you, sir.
Investigation of the patient. Dr. Utsav, we have been listening right from Dr. Shreja, Dr. Tony, and Dr. Indranil already talked about pathogenesis. Do you want to add something more?
I'll just for the information of the audience and people in general, I'll just add that Tony sir, Srija madam, and Indranil sir, Parvez sir already have added extensively about the exaggerated immune response. I just had a point about endothelial cell dysfunction that is happening, and that is the main cause of basically ARDS and fluid retention. So everybody has discussed all the immune dysregulation, but endothelial cell dysfunction is the primary cause of ARDS in COVID patients. So how does endothelial cell dysfunction or endotheliitis happens? So virus can directly affect endothelial cells, leading to lysis and death. And again, Indranil sir had informed about the ACE2 receptor virus binding, which lead to decrease in activity of ACE levels and increase in the bradykinin pathway, which increases vascular permeability, right? And there is activation of neutrophils, which lead to increase of reactive oxygen species, which leads to endothelial cell damage. Then there is increased immune cells, which lead to enhanced endothelial cell contractility, which increases the gap between the two endothelial cells and leading to increased vascular permeability. Hence, the fluid inside the vessels and interstitium increases, causing increased breathlessness in the patient. Then again, cytokines like interleukin 1 beta and TNF alpha, they damage the glycocalyx of endothelial cells, and the hyaluronic acid synthetase that is secreted by these cells. This promotes fluid retention. Again, endothelial cell destruction, once it is destructed, it leads to the exposure of the thrombogenic basement membrane that is there, which leads this thrombogenic basement membrane on activation, leads to the activation of clotting cascade, which then leads to the clotting, the increased thrombogenesis. So that is something extra I just wanted to add to what everybody has added. Thank you so much.
Dr. So, in fact, so much said about this pathogenesis of the cytokine storm. I request Dr. Krishna to write a book. We can write a book on, and I request all the authors, my eminent panelists to give the contribution to the book, because such a nice discussion and nice presentation you all did. It is really good, and it is really helpful for all of our audience to deal with such type of patient. My next question goes to Dr. Tony. Dr. Tony, tell us, IL-6, we have been listening IL-6, interleukin 6 for pretty long time now. Everything, even the general public knows the IL-6 is culprit, cytokine. So, it is present in all the patients of the COVID having the cytokine storm, or something else is maybe there? What is your opinion?
Sir, the issue is that IL-6 has come into notice now since the COVID pandemic came into place. But much before that, IL-6 was always used as a marker for bacterial sepsis. So the issue coming is that at the present point, when we cannot look at IL-6 in an isolated, only one investigation kind of for a diagnosis. The issue coming is in studies that have shown that where we correlate IL-6 with procalcitonin, wherever we find that the IL-6 is the procalcitonin is elevated, IL-6 is also elevated. The procalcitonin is usually a marker for bacterial sepsis. So the issue what we see nowadays, probably, as most of you, I'm sure everybody must be noticing that we don't usually always the patient converts to COVID negative very fast, and after that the patient starts getting bad. So the problem is that in that secondary phase, we are actually out of the viremic infective worsening phase of the virus. So then what we are looking at is after that, when we enter into the probably an early post-COVID phase, what happens is that the issues already caused within the airway, as Dr. Kumar has just spoken about the endothelial dysregulation, all of that is minor small areas of edema, apoptosis, all these problems that have started are not getting solved. So at that point, secondary infection also may be setting in. So especially as we know in most of the IGs, for example, just 2 days back, I had a patient who was just a very young 36-year-old, came in directly in a bad COVID state, and the first culture we sent came back in 3 days as pan-resistant Klebsiella. Along just pan-resistant from the community, that becomes a huge problem. We don't have nothing to treat the patient. So in that situation, we have to always correlate between IL-6 and, if probable, three factors: CRP, IL-6, and procal. So between these, when we find that the IL-6, everything else is negative, that is, we have ruled out a bacterial or fungal infection stage, and then we get the IL-6 elevated and with symptoms of the overall bad treatment of, let us say, the respiratory issues as ARDS or multi-organ failure issues, that is where the indication of a drug like tocilizumab comes in. But otherwise, if you have not ruled out or been sure about the infective process on the bacterial side, when you give a drug to suppress the IL-6, that IL-6 is actually saving the patient from going bad. Then the bacterial infection takes over and the patient finishes. So we should never look at IL-6 as an isolated investigation. And in COVID, pure COVID, in the cytokine storm, definitely IL-6 is a marker that we should look out for, and we should have an high index of suspicion to do an IL-6 early enough when we feel that the patient is not responding to the treatment that we are trying to give. And the most important thing is the turnaround time to get the IL-6 report. In many centers, you send the IL-6 today, you get the report back after 3 days. By the time the phase, the patient is back. So you have to have the turnaround time to get the IL-6 within that day or within a few hours. So if that is where you have the better chance of saving the patient's life. Thank you, sir.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Tony, about your elaboration about the IL-6. My next question goes to Dr. Shrija. Dr. Shrija, you know the cytokine storm is a typical type of this situation. Ultimately, go to the MODS, multiple organ dysfunction syndrome, and death is imminent there. Can we predict any patient that the particular patient is probably undergo cytokine storm? By any means, we can predict it.
Yes, sir. First of all,
because prediction will help us to start early treatment.
Yes, sir. So
we can be able to save the patient, life of the patient.
When we already know there's some risk factors for severe disease of COVID, for example, advanced stage, male gender, patients with comorbidities such as cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes. Such patients, obviously, we know we have to be careful. But when a patient comes to us for admission, usually they will come with pneumonia and are usually oxygen dependent. In such patients, we should, make a decision whether we should wonder whether these patients will worsen or not. And we have other parameters that can help us. Clinically, we can judge the patient on how much oxygen they need, how much is their cough, their breathlessness, and especially fever, persistent fever is an important symptom. And so we have lab markers that Professor Kolzer had already just told us about. So we have acute phase reactants, and we have the CBC. We have markers which we will do upon admission that will help us find out if the patients are worsening or not. And so while mentioning this, I had come across a study published in Annals of Rheumatic Disease. I will share it on CCI later, sir. So it was by an author from Philadelphia, Carricchio et al. And they found they actually formed a preliminary prediction, a prediction formula to find out patients who will go into cytokine storm. And such patients, they took moderate degree of COVID. These patients who had moderate COVID, who had an RT-PCR positive, they had CT signs of COVID, ground glass opacities and consolidation. And those patients had a raised CRP and a hyperferritinemia. And such patients who had a raised CRP on admission and hyperferritinemia were clustered. Now, 12 lab parameters were done in all these patients, and they put them into 3 clusters. So in the first cluster, they took lymphopenia, they took neutrophilia, as well as hypoalbuminemia. And then the second cluster, they took labs of tissue damage. For example, AST, ALT more than 3 times normal, D-dimer more than 10 times normal, cardiac troponins. And then in the last cluster, they took pre-renal parameters. That is an anion gap. They took the Bun-creatinine ratio more than 26. They took hyperkalemia as a factor, and even hyperchloridemia. So they found such patients who present to us with moderate COVID, if one of these parameters is present from each of these clusters, they have more than 90% chance of going into cytokine storm within the next week. So I think even from our clinical experience, we know that patients who have elevated CRP, elevated LDH levels more than 300, CRP more than 3 times upper limit, anemia.
You are not
Such patients will worsen further, and so we must be careful in such patients. And we can predict that such patients might, go into cytokine storm, and we should act early. Maybe we can give corticosteroids early. We can send the IL-6 in these patients, and also the procalcitonin fast, so that if we have to act, we can act fast.
Thank you, Dr. Shrija, for your elaborate answer. I request all the panelists to try to be brief, because we are want of the time, because we are supposed to have large number of questions.
Sir.
We are already having large number of questions on the chat box. So please be brief.
Okay.
Dr. Parvez.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So I just want to add one point, Shrija ma'am. It was a really, really informative answer, and I at least learned a lot from that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kumar.
So, Dr. Parvez, most of the patients of the COVID due to cytokine storm are dying in its second week, third week, and later stages. But we have observed certain early deaths also, first week also. So, what are the important causes? Whether it is attributed to the COVID cytokine storm or some other causes are there?
So that's a very pertinent question, and many of us have seen that patients succumb early on as well. Though that's not very common, but the patients do succumb. So whenever we are thinking of a cytokine storm, as you elaborated beautifully in your presentation, and as we discussed it's a constellation of clinical and lab features.
I'm sorry, Dr. Parvez, I'm just stopping you. Please try to differentiate by early death and sudden death.
That's I'm coming to that, sir. So unless you have the criteria that define your state as having a cytokine storm, you cannot attribute it to a cytokine storm. Patient may die of a regular pneumonia, and pneumonia can itself degenerate into an ARDS or a respiratory failure, and patient may die because of that. So a regular myocarditis, which may not have an associated hypercytokinemia, and unless you have associated constellation of these features, you cannot label it as a cytokine storm related death.
Thank you. So, what are the causes of death? You said early cause. Is there any causes you can tell us? What are the different causes of the death, early deaths?
So causes of early deaths can be regular sepsis. A patient can have a pneumonia, which can degenerate into an acute respiratory distress syndrome, or patient can have a simple myocarditis because of the COVID virus itself, which can degenerate into tachyarrhythmias or a sudden cardiac arrest. So there can be COVID-related diseases which may not necessarily result in a hypercytokinemia. There may be no COVID or cytokine storm, but still there can be a certain death.
Not related to cytokine storm.
Yes, sir.
Correct. So, Dr. Indraneil.
Yes, sir.
There are multiple sudden deaths. We have seen the patient is completely all right at times and in the COVID hospital and suddenly died. What are the important causes of sudden deaths in COVID patients?
Absolutely true, sir. Sudden death
is it again attributed to the cytokine storm or some other causes are there?
Absolutely. So definitely we see a lot of sudden deaths, and mostly probably they are due to cardiac. And it may be acute myocarditis, induced stress cardiomyopathy, myocarditis sequelae, as Dr. Parvez has already told, acute coronary syndrome, even hypoxia. In fact, coagulation disorder. In fact, there are few cases due to pulmonary thromboembolism, coronary thrombosis, stroke. There may be some cardiac component, even electrolyte imbalance. We have seen hyperkalemia. And we have seen some arrhythmias also. It may be due to the drugs, it may be due to the underlying pathologies, or as such, COVID also itself causes some arrhythmia that may cause the death. So mainly they are cardiac, and these may be some of the cause which I think may be pertinent to be shared with you.
Indraneil, can you tell us some pulmonary causes of the sudden death?
The pulmonary thromboembolism is one of the important cause. That's the important cause that I already highlighted. Pulmonary coronary, in fact, pulmonary thromboembolism is probably coagulopathy is important cause, and pulmonary thromboembolism as a sequelae of it is one of the important cause of that.
Have you heard of pneumomediastinum causing the sudden death?
Definitely pneumomediastinum.
Few cases are reported.
Death in pneumomediastinum, okay, it may be also. It may be due to some death.
Now, my question, another question goes to Dr. Utsav again. How long hypercytokemia exists in moderate to severe patient of the COVID? How long it will last? Say, how long you can measure the hypercytokemia? Say, at the high level, elevated level of the various cytokines in the patient. Have you observed? What is your observation?
I find this here a trick question and a fun question at the same time. I wish any of my panelists can, ascertain a timeline to the cytokine storm. I basically, I will draw my conclusions from what Dr. Shrija had mentioned. This is just an observation. I've seen more than, I've seen more than 3,000 COVID patients in last 2 months. Okay, in OPD and in indoor including. So after such a vast experience of COVID patients, I can just mention very clearly that you cannot determine the cytokine storm. You cannot determine, nobody on earth right now at this stage can determine that at this duration. But yes, I can say that patients having multiple factors like elevated CRP, elevated ferritin levels, elevated LDH levels, low albumin levels, these patients tend to fare poor and have a longer, immune dysregulation and a longer duration of cytokine storm. Patients having good albumin levels have a shorter duration of a cytokine storm. I have seen very bad patients recovering with the normal body parameters and absolutely healthy patients getting destroyed by COVID cytokine storm who had bad parameters. There is definitely the initial immunity levels, they do matter in COVID, and nobody on earth right now at this stage can define the length of cytokine storm. At least I can't. I allow my panel to correct me if they can.
Anyone wish to add anything? Dr. Parvez, you want to add?
I think, he's right. In terms of the predictivity of development of a cytokine storm, there have been some studies wherein they have found that the earlier criteria that were used, like for macrophage activation syndrome or HLH or H criteria, did not predict with a significant sensitivity or specificity the development of the cytokine release syndrome. However, the duration as to how long it continues in a particular patient is still unraveled. It's not clear.
I agree with
one
more point. Even on giving the right treatment, like the textbook treatment, or even on giving
a highly individualistic.
We have a lot number of patients who have gone from 13 out of 25 to 24 out of 25.
Absolutely.
9 out of 25 going to 21 out of 25. Even admitted, rightly treated patients have deteriorated. So that is an ongoing continuous cytokine storm, even giving the right treatment. That is happening in all the patients. We need to learn more about this.
Absolutely. Parvez, it has happened sometimes that the hypoxia has been corrected to the best of its extent and the patient is normal with even without oxygen. Patient was going to be discharged, suddenly developed cytokine storm.
I know one of my patients who is having the hypercytokemia, but is elevated level to the extent of 150 or 200 after the 4 months of the initiation of the disease.
So there are some patients also on home treatment, moderate COVID, even they develop cytokine storm before they reach the hospital, and then we find that the patient has developed cytokine storm and it is very difficult for us to manage and treat.
That's why thromboembolic phenomena have actually come up as a major cause of morbidity in them and even deaths, whether they are pulmonary or even cardiac. They're out of the hospital and they may develop a sudden cardiac arrest.
In fact,
that has been attributed to
absolutely, sir. Sudden deaths are mostly attributed to the cardiac origin, and cardiac causes are there.
Tony, can you tell us about the hypercytokemia is essential feature for all the COVID patients? Is it essential to be there in all the patients of severe COVID?
There's a long answer. There's a short answer.
Short
answer. I will say the answer is only no. So the thing is that IL-6 we can consider as a marker only. We are seeing the first wave and the next wave totally different scenarios with the way the patients are presenting, and the markers are not matching up to what we saw in the first situation. So, and actually, the speaking problem is that in my practice, I don't, not much of my patients progress to cytokine storm because I use an immunomodulator called Sepsivac. So I use it early on in the disease, and most of the patients don't proceed to cytokine storm.
Tony sir, we have been using Sepsivac. It has good responses in lots of patients, but it's not a guarantee. Sepsivac has produced some very good results in many patients and has been beneficial. But again, I would like for the audience in general that Sepsivac is not a guarantee. It has produced some very good results, but again, it is not a guarantee. Just sorry, sir, sorry to interfere.
No, Dr. Kumar, the issue is that even the most recommended and best vaccine or the best drugs, nothing has a guarantee.
Yeah.
The only issue is that whatever the best, since we are the only soldiers available, the best we have to use.
I stand for it. I stand.
And what I have seen in my practice is that the earlier that you initiate,
the better the response. The whole game in COVID is the early game. Those I have seen, at least in the second wave, we have seen in Varanasi, I can say for certain, a lot of rich people have died. Those people who could afford everything have died a lot because they were waiting in home with oxygen. And that is where things got wrong. The people who access to the healthcare facilities early have recovered and come home. Those people who had ultra late initiation of steroids because of the doctors, some inhibition to start low dose steroids or extremely early steroids and extremely late steroids. Both are harmful in COVID. At least that is what's my observation.
Dr. Kumar, if I can just add a point, the scenario which you told just now, the problem is that the people who are being treated at home, since we know about the happy hypoxia scenario, people don't pick up the damage what we see in a clinical aspect until unless they're actually bad.
Yeah, definitely.
At that point, then reversing everything is more of a problem because by the time the patient will be already having some sort of a secondary infection along with that, the moment you give the steroid, the patient worsens because of the steroid. Because once you're out of the phase of where it can act, you have to give the steroid only when it acts. The moment patient is in cytokine storm and you are seeing a progression of a secondary infection, you have to always remember to stop the steroid or reduce the steroid drastically. You should usually just keep the steroid continues along with that. That continues to compound the problem. You have to stop the steroid and then go to the next modality of treatment. That is what I feel is usually better. But I didn't have much of a cytokine storm situation. So
we have simultaneously seen some cases of cytokine storm and secondary infection. Though if you immediately or rapidly decrease steroids in this patient, the patient will have a rebound, breathlessness, fever, and further deterioration. That is what we have seen. So I have a slight difference of opinion over that. Like we have to decrease steroids, yes, but the rapid decrease will have its own set of problems.
So we are going to talk about the steroid again.
Okay. That's right.
So we should not discuss steroid. Dr. Shrija.
Yes.
You tell us whether the D-dimer level is elevated level of the D-dimer is an indication of the imminent type of the COVID cytokine storm or something else is there. You are in agreement?
Sir, I would agree it is. I mean, as we discussed before, I think Kaul sir has discussed, Indranil sir has discussed, even Tony and Kumar have discussed that, of course, COVID, we know is an interplay between hyperinflammation and coagulant state. So we know that D-dimer is a degradation product of fibrin, which is, which indicates that the level of thrombin activity. So definitely, and there have been studies, and we know from our own experience that there's a correlation between CRP, IL-6, and D-dimer values. So when we find that the D-dimer values are raised, usually more than 3 to 5 times normal, that the patients are usually worse, they have signs of hypoxia, their CRP levels are high, and there have been studies that show that even IL-6 correlates. So, and that it would, I guess, tell us that the patient is going into cytokine storm. So if anybody wants to add...
Any panelists want to add anything more to the answer? No.
So it should be the same cascade, sir. If we see the D-dimer rising up, all the pro-inflammatory markers rising, it's the same cascade that has been involved. And that is the reason why D-dimer and the IL-6 and all other CRP and all rises and all thing goes on. when the cascade is involved, all of these things goes on rising.
Yes, and D-dimer is an acute phase reactant. So
Yeah,
I
yes.
suppose, yeah, it's the same cascade that goes. So, yes.
So thank you, Dr. Shrija.
Thank you, sir.
Now we move to the treatment part of the cytokine storm. My question is Dr. Parvez Kaur. We have been finding the cytokine blocking drugs in a short supply. A single injection of tocilizumab sold it at the cost of a lakh rupees, 40,000, 50,000, and at any cost. So what is utility? And if it is useful drug, then at what time, what is the right time to give it to the patient of the cytokine storm?
Thank you, sir. I mean, when we talk of IL-6 antagonists, we are basically talking of two classes. One is the IL-6 inhibitors, the receptor inhibitors, and the other is the IL-6 inhibitors. And of the receptor inhibitors, we have tocilizumab, and then we have cetuximab, and we also need to know that tocilizumab is the one that has actually an FDA approval for use in COVID. And then we have sarilumab as well. NIH actually recommends that tocilizumab should be used in conjunction with steroids, and that's where I slightly differed from the panelists, that we need to continue probably steroids for dexamethasone. They recommend 6 milligrams daily for up to 10 days in certain hospitalized patients. And the hospitalized patients could be in the intensive care unit, or they could be outside of the intensive care unit. And if you're talking of patients in the intensive care unit, they have to be there within prior 24 hours, and tocilizumab should be actually used within first 3 days of admission, and should be used in patients who require mechanical ventilation or non-invasive ventilation, or HFNC with an oxygen of FiO2 of more than 0.4, or more than 30 liters per minute of oxygen flow. And if you're talking of a non-ICU patient, we have to have a patient who, again, within the first 3 days of admission, and he should be requiring a greater oxygen, enhancing oxygen requirement, whether it would mean an HFNC or a non-invasive ventilation. But generally, they usually have an elevated increased marker of inflammation in the form of CRP, which is normally more than 75 milligrams per liter.
Excuse me, everyone. This is Dr. N.H. Krishna. Namaste.
Namaste.
Hello, sir. Namaste.
Congratulations. We have 1794 logins.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
And thank you so
You are
much.
breaking the record every day. So you are breaking the record every day.
And thank you so much, panelists. It's going great. You are permitted to extend till 9:45, 10 p.m. But you start taking up Janta Janardhan questions from 9:15 onwards.
Okay.
Because they are our vote bank of logins.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Huh?
So, Samaria sir, with your permission, can I ask just Dr. Parvez, just if a patient present late, for example, say on the 6th, 7th day, and we find that the inflammatory markers are rising, can we, will we do injustice if we give him this tocilizumab to this patient?
See, and this is a very important question, and this is something that actually confronts all of us. And you have to take an individual decision, and this is a decision that has got to be taken in the context of an expert opinion or a personal experience. If we go by guideline recommendations, guidelines say that you have to have a patient within 3 days of admission. That's it. And but there are times when you are constrained to give it because you have nothing else to offer, and you give it in the hope of giving some benefit to the patient. But a hospitalized patient who is beyond this particular period of time, and sometimes who does not have an increasing demand for oxygen, for them there is no clear evidence that it helps. But nonetheless, I agree with you. There are times when physicians are constrained to give these drugs, especially in context of the time that we had patients who were forced to stay at home because of the non-availability of beds. That time people have taken a decision for administering it, and it is only evidence based on those patients that might actually tell us subsequently whether it worked or it did not work.
Parvez sir, can I just ask one doubt along with that?
Yes, please.
Sir, what about this, the COV barrier trial, in which the simple baricitinib with corticosteroids for patients on supplemental O2, not even on mechanical ventilation, showed a good survival benefit. So
I agree with that. I mean, it was used, and Baxdrostat has been used, and it has been found to be useful. But let's accept that we are learning about COVID. To be honest, we have sketchy, measly evidence of most, even for tocilizumab, even if it has been approved by FDA, it's approved by NIH. But trials, I mean, most of the drugs have been used on the basis of emergency use authorization. You're cognizant of the various fiascos that happened in the context of COVID-related research. You have had unheard of retractions from medical journals like JAMA, Lancet, and Anigium. And so that was something that was unheard of, say a couple of years back. So I would say, yes, these are emergency authorizations that have come from FDA or NIH and even our own ministry, but the body of evidence is clearly not strong.
Again, there are some controversies. Again, how do you just find out whether the patient is not having severe infection? What to do if the patient is again having severe infection? So tocilizumab is something which we really right time, the right person to choose is another important thing practically, which I think of.
Absolutely.
I actually
Request you to
agree
be
with,
brief. My request goes to the all panelists.
Dr. Samaria, actually the discussion has become so interesting. You cannot, nobody can, we can't.
There are other more interesting questions. Are there.
Okay, sir.
Okay, sir. That's right.
Audience questions are more interesting. So let us move to we have seen large number of these cytokines are there. So blocking, we have talked about tocilizumab or interleukin 6 blocking drug. So what are the other blocking drugs, other interleukin blocking drugs? They are available and they can be of help with the patient? Dr. Indraneel.
So, sir, I'll be very brief in that, as you told me. So, in fact, the most trial one is the tocilizumab. In fact, IL-6 inhibitor, in addition to tocilizumab, there are sarilumab, and there is cetuximab, and these are all targeted monoclonal antibodies which dampers or downstream the IL-6 signaling pathway, which can lead to decreased cell proliferation and differentiation, oxidative stress, exudation, and improve clinical outcome. In fact, as already told, IL-10 is also there, which recruit the JAK, which transit cascade signal to activate signal transduction and activation of transcription, like the SAT3 on. And there we have the tofacitinib, though not that much trial. Again, a small molecular compound which target the JAK1, JAK3 can be applied to COVID-19, and there are few reports where people have used this in addition to patients complicating with ulcerative colitis. So another drug, anakinra, which has been already used as a recombinant human and interleukin 1 receptor antagonist, and this has been tried a lot in rheumatoid arthritis, and some of this off-label used in patients who are on these CAR T cells and the macrophage activated system and secondary phagocytic lymphohistiocytosis, and these patients, this has also been tried. But basically, the most tried one is the tocilizumab.
Thank you very much. Now, another very important question goes to Dr. Utsav. Of the corticosteroid, this is the only drug which we are having so far. We are able to save the large number of lives of the patient. So, what is your opinion about it? Because we have seen right from very high dose, 1,000 milligram of methylprednisolone using in a bolus form, and to the 4 milligram of the methylprednisolone. People are using as your wish and will. So, what is your opinion about the corticosteroid? Utility of the corticosteroid in a cytokine storm?
I would like to take
severe COVID disease.
Yeah, I'd like to take you to the beginning of this COVID story, the COVID pandemic, where it was mentioned that you should never give steroids, and steroids are harmful, and all what could have been said had been said, and people were dying. Okay, then certainly data came in, and with that data we understood that yes, steroids have a positive role. Then later we understood that steroids in early phase are harmful. Steroids given extremely late are also harmful. So somewhere in between, steroids are beneficial. So that is something we have to understand, is there is a role of steroids. Yes, they possess this anti-inflammatory potential. They reduce the lung damage induced by cytokine storm. They do that by decreasing the gene transcription of several pro-inflammatory cytokines, chemokines, adhesion molecules. They also, they reduce the destructive effects of these cytokines. So that is where you have to understand that corticosteroids in right doses are beneficial, in low doses are useless, in high doses are again harmful by causing other secondary infections and increasing sugar levels, of course.
Very important subject of the corticosteroid. Anyone? Dr. Parvez, you want to, Dr. Indri, Dr. Tony, you want to add something? Please be brief in addition, because this is one of the very important drugs we are using and saving the life of the patient.
So of the drugs that we have available for the cytokine syndrome, I think corticosteroids are a panacea, and I agree with Dr. Utsav, whatever he said, that and if we categorize the drugs that have a definite role in helping us in treating in patients of COVID, steroids, oxygen, anticoagulants probably stand out, and maybe some role of immunomodulators like tocilizumab. Steroids are certainly one of the primary drugs that we have against COVID.
Same thing to echo, sir. Absolutely. The only thing that absolutely rightly told by Kumar.
Dr. Tony, multi-organ dysfunction is a eventuality in all the patient of the cytokine storm or something else is there.
Can you repeat the question? There was a break.
So you repeat the question. He did not hear it well.
My question is whether the multi-organ dysfunction is essential part of the followed by the COVID cytokine storm or not, or something else could be there.
No, sir. The problem is that the multi-organ dysfunction is the once you reach that point, then it is almost nothing more to do after that. So the issue is that we have to be able to plan the treatment, or the goal of our idea of the evaluation should be, first we have to be able to identify when the patient is going into the cytokine storm initially itself, to be able to initiate treatments that can modify the track of the disease. Second, we have to at that point establish what might be the severity of the onset of what has started, and what level of drugs are required to suppress. For example, we just had a question about this thing about using pulse steroids. So even now, if you are in a situation where the low dose steroid is not working, where you are having no other infection source, you can definitely go for pulse steroids. But a very short course, maybe 2 or 3 days only, and you taper down and go back to the low dose. But again, you should be under strict monitoring for other infections, and should avoid any other infection setting in, especially fungal infections, which are seen in the scenario of using high steroid use. And most importantly, at whichever point, every day you see the patient, you have to keep determining if the clinical trajectory of what you have planned and what is ongoing, are they in the same line or not? Because at any point, if there is a deviation, you have to be able to autocorrect and step back and reevaluate the situation.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tony. Dr. Shirja.
Yes, sir.
Convalescent plasma is another controversial subject, which we are at times it is useful, it is not useful, it is withdrawn, it is used. People are having to open the plasma bank, and all that was there in Delhi and other places. So, what is the utility of? You find any utility of this particular drug, cytokine convalescent plasma, to the cytokine storm patients?
Thank you, sir. Sir, to be honest with you, in this wave, I have not used convalescent plasma at all. Yes, in the first wave we did, and our hospital has a blood bank, and we were enrolling patients and giving convalescent plasma. But I think with the evidence that we have now, especially like the Placid trial, which was done in India itself, where they recruited more than 39 hospitals, and they took more than 450 patients, I believe, and they found that even in moderate cases, convalescent plasma didn't really affect the mortality or the progression of the disease. Yes, definitely, if given early, it helps in conversion of a positive state to a negative state. So there helps in conversion of the disease, but there's no mortality benefit in giving convalescent plasma. So I personally have not given to any patient in this wave, and I don't think it has any effect on cytokine storm per se. Maybe given in very early disease, like mild cases or very mild cases. But then I don't know how you can tell a patient who is, just reaching mild to moderate. But if there have been private patients who have asked for it, so in such patients we're given, but I don't find any effect, and I don't think we have any evidence to give it to in cytokine storm. I would ask.
Plasma is oriented for the antiviral phase.
Yes, exactly. So cytokine storm, of course, doesn't, it doesn't fit into the cytokine storm picture. Maybe I suppose the question could be, could it prevent cytokine storm? So I'm not sure. Maybe I would ask other panelists, sir, if you could.
No, I mean, if we talk of the evidence now, it came with a lot of fanfare, a lot of bang that yes, it's going to be very helpful, and everybody started giving it. But eventually, the regulatory authorities all over the world, including our own Indian Council of Medical Research, recommended against its use. So we are no more using it, and I think there is no evidence to suggest its use, and I think it should not be used.
Yes, sir. True, sir. So if I may ask, has anybody used baricitinib with remdesivir for patients?
I haven't.
I've used in one patient, but you have, Kumar.
Yeah.
You have? Okay. I haven't.
And how was it, Kumar?
It was okay. Nothing so great. Nothing as positive as
Steroid.
as the article was mentioning that there is a definite positive response.
Yes.
I personally did not feel anything like outwardly that is creating a difference in the patient.
So did you reduce the
that was my
steroids?
point, Dr. Kumar. My point was that we are using a drug in the hope that it will work. And unless we have a definite clinical trial where we have a randomized cohort where in one we use, in the other we don't use, then we can analyze at the end of the a particular period of time that yes, this is helpful, this is not helpful.
Studies, Parvez,
I agree. Yes, I totally.
These are mental case studies. Like I can say I totally agree with Tony sir's experience of Sepsivac. Sepsivac has shown some pretty good response.
So I'll be cautiously optimistic even for Sepsivac. I mean, I know that there are some early data to suggest that Sepsivac is good for immunomodulation in COVID, but it has not been tried in COVID per se in a clinical trial mode. Early studies from ARS, but otherwise, one ERJ has some data. But overall,
studies. I'm totally agree with.
Yes,
the problem with India is we have so many case studies, but no trials.
Yes, unfortunately, so you're right.
So actually, the issue in PGI Chandigarh, there was a study which was published in Lung India, and
I know
there was a benefit for
there were just three cases that Ritesh published, and that's I agree that that's some evidence, some case series. But on a basis where we have a strong basis of evidence, we need to have randomized trials, and I'm sure that all of you would agree with me.
But two more. One is the study was done in just a few out of the main ones in Fortis Hindanani, Mumbai. Out of 117 patients, 116 showed good recovery. Then in our European Respiratory Journal, Army One trial, it showed that in COVID-19 critical patients, there has been early resolution of respiratory failure in the Sepsivac group.
That is definitely one evidence that came in ARG. I agree with that.
Exploratory, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-centric trial.
I agree with that.
Definitely positive response. That is just out.
Yes, that is ARG. It's a multi-centric trial. I agree.
So we have come to the end and last question to all the panelists. There are large number of the drugs coming up, which say ICMR drug, glucose, what they call it? 2G glucose, huh? I don't know actually the exact name.
2DG glucose.
DD2G.
And the newer drugs, Regeneron therapy, which Trump has received, and many other drugs are coming up every day. So what is your opinion? Please, one by one. Dr. Parvez, then Dr. Indraneel, what you feel like?
So these are experimental therapies, and they have got to be proved by evidence over time. Then only it should be, unless and until strong bodies recommend them, I think we should be wary of using them and use them only in a clinical trial mode.
Dr. Haldar?
Yes. Yes, sir, absolutely echoing what Dr. Kaul told, that there are drugs which are used empirically or some anecdotal studies which are useful in COVID as such. and also for decreasing this cytokine storm. But we have to have some good evidence before we can go on using this study, unless it is in some trial that we are doing. I'll be moving for good evidence while treating my patient, rather than unless a patient is put on trial and seen what the drug does.
Absolutely.
Dr. Utsav, you want to tell something?
Sir, this trial data is at times flawed, and the company.
No, don't call trial data fraud.
At times, at times the company does trial, like हमारे जो रामदेव बाबा हैं, उन्होंने mild and ultra mild cases में coronal खिला के prove किया कि हम coronal से ठीक कर सकते हैं. It can happen to a lot of people. So I have nothing against anybody doing the marketing. Yes, with time we will evolve. With time we will evolve. Like in wave 1, everybody was given ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. Just yesterday, ICMR has removed both the drugs from its guideline. So we are evolving. Yes, the treatment will keep on evolving. The mainstay is the right time to introduce the right drug. That is what is important, and the right doctor doing it.
Tony.
Yes, Tony.
Sir, the point is, we all are used to evidence-based medicine, and we hope and we wish that we can get all the studies on time to be able to implement the study. But the problem is, we are all part of a worldwide trial right now on who will survive COVID and who we can treat in COVID. So the issue is that we have to be maybe a bit more proactive in looking out for items which may not be maybe not as profitable for the companies to spend money for research or marketing. And for example, I felt ivermectin is having a better effect in the way it has been. I used it early in the OP basis itself. So now, for example, now even if I'm talking about Sepsivac, the issue with Sepsivac is that from entry of the virus into the body to the early clearance, to boosting the immunity, to suppressing all, as we told, there are so many cytokine markers from IL-1 till IL infinity. It suppresses almost everything equally and keeps the body from acting against itself. And that is what we want. Because as we all know, everybody becomes negative by the 9th or 10th day. There is nothing about the virus doing anything after that. After that is only the body reacting by itself. So if we can keep the cytokine level in a control phase, that itself will probably improve how the patient comes out overall. And we need more research. We need ongoing research. We need to add up all our experiences and make up the research and get conclusions.
So I'll make a small point, sir, here. Dr. Tony, I agree with you that there are drugs that have been shown by various studies to be useful. But as of now, since we are talking to a huge body of about 2,000 pulmonologists across the country, we must emphasize that we use either evidence-based medicine, which is based on guidelines, robust guidelines, based on randomized control trials, or we use any drug, whichever we want to use, in a clinical trial mode. And beyond these two, if we do not have these two settings, we should desist from using the drugs. That's my take.
That's the absolute thing we are talking of, sir. That's the absolute thing we should ethically do in that way.
Absolutely.
Totally agree with Parvez sir. Is that evidence-based medicine has taken us so far, and evidence-based medicine given in right doses is very important. Like the most important thing is the dosage, which people miss, and that is where a lot of patients have been mismanaged because evidence-based medicine was not used.
Use whatever you want to. Please use whatever, but use in a clinical trial mode.
To back that
and that is it.
Totally agree there.
So just one thing, while we were on the topic of Sepsivac, have any of you noticed that TB patients do fairly well? I mean, all of my TB patients who've got COVID have recovered. So I think it's something got to do with the mycobacterium itself. So I mean,
it's more like any lung disease patient is not affected by COVID.
No, not really. I wouldn't say that. But especially the
asthma don't get bad.
Well, I mean, I've seen those worsen, but especially TB patients have done good, fairly well, I feel.
This is in personal.
What do you want to mean? TB patients, they are not infected with COVID, or
No,
if
no, sir, they're infected. They're infected. They're infected
while
while they have active COX, sir. So those such patients, I've seen that maybe because of the trained immunity that probably, Mycobacterium TB causes in the body, and maybe that's what Sepsivac and, even BCG is doing.
Shrija ma'am, totally agreed. And I have seen this. We have a lot of TB patients, but the population of COPD and asthma patients returning with COVID and the population of TB patients returning with COVID was drastically different. So I take your point there.
I don't know if
That means is there some role for ATT?
Not ATP. I think the TB itself.
There must be an ATT anyway for the cough.
Mycobacterium itself has some protective effects. I guess that's what ma'am implies.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. I think what you're trying to say about Sepsivac, Tony, is that it's Mycobacterium welchii. I think it's the Mycobacterium itself that causes,
As Professor said, just for the general,
we cannot confuse the public.
Of course not.
100% cure. It is only one modality that will help us get the patient out.
So I think one thing again we have to tell patients is the importance of vaccination. I think Kaul was, talking about it in the start.
Now we should. Last question goes to Tony, Dr. Tony. What is your opinion about evidence-based drug Coronil, Baba Ramdev drug? He claimed it is evidence-based.
Sir, I am a trained allopathologist. I am not aware about the and I will not comment or recommend anything regarding that action because I don't know what it does.
Anyone?
I would agree with him. We should not comment on it because we are not trained to comment on it.
We cannot comment on something we don't know. We have got nothing.
We don't know. Yes.
Let's go to the audience questions, please.
Now we are moving to large number of the questions are already there with me. The first question is: patient is having mild symptoms. Should we give the oral steroid?
No.
So the answer is no. Answer is no. There is a clear indication of steroids if a patient is not hypoxemic and he would not require steroids. It is generally hospitalized patients and mostly having a low oxygen saturation. Those are the ones who require steroids.
Dr. Hanuman Prasad Marda from the Gangtok, Sikkim, he is asking the key point on test for diagnosis other than that of the hypoxia.
I'm sorry, I did not.
Key point to diagnose other than hypoxia.
I'm sorry.
Key point or test to diagnose COVID other than hypoxia.
No, hypoxia is not a diagnosis for COVID. Certainly not.
We can move on to the other question.
We move to the another question, very important question.
Yes, sir.
Drugs like doxycycline, budesonide, and colchicine said to decrease cytokine storm. If so, how much we can expect from them? The question is asking about the questioner is asking about the drugs cytokine, doxycycline, and budesonide and colchicine in the treatment of cytokine storm.
So, if I take it, sir, doxycycline has not been proved to have any effect on the cytokine syndrome. And if we talk of, you mentioned colchicine and?
Colchicine and budesonide.
Budesonide has been shown. Budesonide given in an 800 microgram twice daily has been shown that it might delay the development of a severe or reduce the development of severe COVID in patients with mild symptoms. However, there is no evidence that it prevents the development of cytokine syndrome as such. That's true. And third, about colchicine. Colchicine is an experimental drug which has been used in a clinical trial mode, and there are some studies ongoing this time also regarding its effect in COVID as such, not necessarily in cytokine syndrome.
Rather, hydroxychloroquine has been tried for cytokine storm.
It has been tried, certainly.
Acequase has been tried in cytokine storms.
I just want to add a snippet to Parvez sir's my experience with colchicine, I have used colchicine actively in CAD patients with COVID with very good results. In patients with coronary artery disease, heart patients having colchicine with the routine treatment, we have had some good results. In only coronary, I'm talking about the subset of COVID plus coronary artery disease.
So I would strongly suggest to you, please start a clinical trial on that. I mean,
Yes.
have
As such, there is no evidence available in literature.
the protocol
As such, there is
approved
no
and
evidence
do
available
a
in
study.
literature.
And that is good. That would be enlightening for the scientific community.
Dr. Kumar, so those patients must have already been on aspirin or clopidogrel also, right?
Yeah.
Anticoagulation.
Yeah.
So they never had any D-dimer issues.
No, patients had raised the dimer issues. We had to put them on LMWH.
And these patients, you give steroids too, Kumar?
Yeah. Low dose steroids, 6 mg of Dexona was used.
Okay, along with it, you give colchicine, 0.5.
So that's why, I mean, it's very difficult to pinpoint that colchicine was therapeutically better. But that's why you need to have a standard of care with standard of care plus colchicine in the two arms. Then compare, yes, that would be whatever would be the...
We were having in our brains in alternate patients trying this and trying that, and we have seen, it is just experience.
It may be right. I mean, you may be proved absolutely right, and that might add to the scientific literature. But as of now, it will be an experience-based recommendation.
Yeah. This is totally.
Dr. Mike, another question comes. Dr. Venkataramanna from the Telangana, Nizamabad. He is asking that, sir, we have any authentic marker to predict cytokine storm both clinically or lab-wise?
I think Dr. Shreeja talked about the
authentic marker
the study
clinically and lab-wise of the
so we have to have an RT-PCR positive, and then she has said that we have to have a high ferritin and a high CRP, and she gives them 4.6, more than 4.6 and more than 250 of ferritin, and then the three clusters of the markers she talked about: hypoalbuminemia, metabolic profile, and cytopenias. So she talked about it. Yes, there are one study actually has addressed this with a high specificity of around 85% and a sensitivity of around 80%. So that is the only study that has been done which shows that yes, there is a possibility of predicting development of a cytokine storm based on clinical and lab parameters.
Can I ask just one question? So there is one question, very interesting question, which I find it very interesting. It is from Dr. Bharat Rajni from Ahmedabad, Gujarat. Do immunomodulator cause secondary infection like mucormycosis? It is very interesting in current scenario. Immunomodulator, do they cause a secondary infection like mucor? Anybody?
No. Why will they cause? That will help prevent the secondary infection. No. By improving the body's response to an external infection.
So if you're talking of immunomodulator, if you're talking of tocilizumab or a drug like that, we have to understand that these should be avoided in patients who are significantly immunosuppressed, particularly, especially if somebody has used a recent biological immunomodulatory agent. So, we also know that we must be using it whenever we use it in combination with dexamethasone. I'm not sure whether what he says is right, but otherwise, immunomodulation, why should we cause it? No.
So that is the thing we are answering because large number of the questions are there.
Yes, sir.
Another question.
Sir.
Related to the cytokine storm, how to know the timing and severity of the cytokine storm? What is the best treatment to stop it? We already talked about it.
I guess we already answered
in the presentation in detail.
I think it was already answered.
Already answered, sir.
What are the common complications of the cytokine storm?
So we talked about it. That's addressed. Every single organ system can be involved.
There is one very interesting question. Do blood transfusion help control cytokine storm by diluting inflammatory cytokine? I don't think so. I have never heard of this.
No.
So I read a case report from Andalusia which said that they gave that plasma exchange therapy in a patient who was in cytokine storm along with convalescent plasma, and that patient improved. So I don't know if it's related.
There's too much to be done in India.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I found it interesting.
You can't prove that patient would not have improved otherwise also.
Another
That's
question
the point.
Comes a personal question. A doctor is asking why my mother's pulse rate is so high after the COVID recovery?
Anxiety.
I have one point to add to this. This is a very common observation of sinus bradycardia during COVID period and sinus tachycardia post-COVID period. I guess it is related to the extra effort the heart has to take to pump to a diseased lung or a bit fibrous lung. That is my observation or my interpretation of it.
So apart from a direct involvement of the cardiac muscle as a result of developing myocarditis or a cardiomyopathy, the conduction system might also get involved as a result of dysautonomia, which has been seen in some patients of COVID or post-COVID, which results in increased or a reduction in the heart rate. But that said, these are observations rather than definite conclusions.
So there have been
there
have a few number of studies which have shown that there are few arrhythmias. The tachyarrhythmia is one of the important thing, and that is maybe because of the drugs that are used. A lot of the people are using beta 2 agonist, that's inhaler salbutamol with or long-acting beta 2 agonist one. Then as such, COVID itself may cause as a direct arrhythmogenic for this because of the cardiomyopathies and all other related issues, and some of them. The channelopathies or something they call it, that they uncover, or the underlying channelopathies or something that they mention in some of these studies that may be reason for the tachycardia that the patient is having.
So one more question. One more question. One question.
Yes, sir.
Is pulse dose of methylprednisolone harmful or beneficial in COVID cytokine storm? Pulse dose methylprednisolone.
So it's not mentioned anywhere as from the standard guidelines. It's not mentioned that you should use pulse dose of steroids. As simple as that.
But are we using it like?
No, that's a different question. I mean, again, we come back to the same discussion, that should we use it out of experience or should we use it because we feel like using it? That is
amount of experience is no. Guidelines are always better.
Guidelines are not suggesting it, as somebody says. We don't have any guidelines suggesting that we give pulse steroids. No.
Isolated increase in the CRP and interleukin 6, which should be treated with the tocilizumab when the rest of the inflammatory markers are normal. Isolated increase in CRP and interleukin 6 need to be treated with the tocilizumab or when all the other markers are normal.
Dr. Shreya, you want to take that?
I think, sir, we should see the patient as a whole and just not look at a CRP and IL-6. You know, if a patient is, of course, worsening, I don't think there would be such a state where you will just find CRP and IL-6 raised. If his hypoxemia is worsening and, you know, he's clearly going into cytokine storm, yes, as long as you've ruled out sepsis, I think we can go ahead with tocilizumab, only based on these factors.
I would agree with you.
Another question from Nagpur is coming. What are the clinical predictors of this cytokine storm?
I think that has already been addressed by Dr. Shrija.
So there's a question on methylene blue. I saw some private practitioners use this, and
Methylene blue, there is a study going on in the National Clinical Trials in the clinicaltrials.gov in the US. It has some antiviral activity, but there is no body in the world is recommended.
Okay.
Post-COVID fibrosis. Another question regarding the post-COVID fibrosis.
Sir.
Post-COVID fibrosis and the cardiac events. How to manage in long-term basis?
Post-COVID fibrosis is a major concern for most of us, and it is something that is unraveling because many a times we have features suggestive of fibrosis early on in the recovery phase of COVID, and then we believe that it is developing into a post-COVID fibrosis, and then 3 months down the line, we find that all these changes have reversed. However, there is a subset of patients who are especially elderly, who have a pre-existing lung disease, who have male sex, and they are the ones who have and had evidence of a hypercytokinemia. They might actually and have a peripheral distribution of their disease. They might eventually develop a post-COVID fibrosis, and it's anybody's guess this time whether we can intervene in between. People have used steroids in the stage when they are not as yet fully going into evolved into fibrosis, or or there is a skeletal, sketchy evidence for using of antifibrotics, though many of us are using antifibrotics, but there is very little evidence to suggest that it's post-COVID fibrosis is something that we are learning about, and I think we don't have concrete answers to give as of now. It is it's a subject of a number of studies world over, and as we cruise along, we might get answers.
Small question from one of the audience that whether diabetes is a risk factor for the cytokine storm.
I mean, high glucose has been associated with a severe COVID, and if we think that there is severe COVID is a surrogate of a cytokine storm, yes, but direct correlation I'm not aware of. Maybe other panelists would talk about that.
But again, there was a question which I've already stated that diabetes is an immunocompromised state. So really, if the patient is immunocompromised, why is he going to an hyperimmune response developing cytokine storm? So in that way, just immunosuppression in one way doesn't prove that he will not go into cytokine storm, because the pathway for that immune response is different in that scenario.
So there is not a single pathway that is operated. There's an interconnection of so many pathways.
Another very interesting question.
Just one important question is, two drugs have been used very frequently apart from tocilizumab. That was one, itolizumab and bevacizumab have been used in good frequency, at least in UP, I can say. So, any experience, anybody, about bevacizumab and tocilizumab?
I have no experience of bevacizumab or itolizumab. Itolizumab is also an anti-IL-6, and bevacizumab is an anti-VEGF. So, I have no experience.
Anybody has any experience?
Oh, sorry. I think you should share your experience.
I have used bevacizumab with good responses. Though whenever I've used bevacizumab, I have tried to always use it early, and we have some very good results with bevacizumab.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Another very important question.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever seen any cytokine storm in a child? Children's?
We don't deal with that children.
Not so far. No report is there, nah?
They develop something what has been termed as a multi-system inflammatory syndrome, which is kind of a surrogate of a cytokine storm in the elderly, and that has been actually kind of linked to something like a Kawasaki disease, which is also a disease state which is very much like a cytokine storm, though I would not be able to answer the question directly, but I know for sure that this MISC has been reported in children, and that has been described as a disease state which is very much like a Kawasaki disease.
Absolutely right. This has been published in some of these, that they are having these kind of things, and it is really very difficult for them to manage, and probably most of the children have succumbed with that.
So we are now come to an end.
Thank you, sir.
Very interesting session, because still large number of the questions are pending, which
Sir, I wanted
need to be addressed.
Go back to the diabetic point. I don't know if it's only me, but I've seen a lot of new onset diabetes who present at the time of COVID first time and quite uncontrolled. Has anybody else seen that? Lot of new diagnoses.
Sorry, what did you say, Tony? That diabetes is persistently uncontrolled.
No, lot of new diagnoses with the COVID.
First time detected diabetic
definitely.
at the time of the
COVID involves the pancreas and ultimately causes diabetes. That's one of the reason that
So
it is
pre-diabetic because of the stress is actually unraveled, and he gets manifest diabetes. That's possible.
Yeah.
Or COVID
And
might
I-
actually
They were
cause-
already pre-diabetics, and we saw them for the first time.
Yes, I mean,
During COVID, they were
stress
diagnosed.
causing an unraveling unmanifest diabetes. That is
Absolutely.
possible.
So it could be stress causing, and I think they react more to steroids. Their sugars go
Yeah.
way topsy-turvy as
So
compared to.
even young
Yeah.
patients who are diagnosed with severe COVID, they develop diabetes, and it is because probably the involvement of the
True,
pancreas.
sir. Yes, sir.
Very, very interesting.
Yes, sir. It's
Very,
a
very,
matter.
very, very
somebody-
interesting session.
So somebody has asked about the antibody cocktail also, sir. Antibody-
There are large
So
number of
has
the
anybody
questions.
used it?
There are large number of the questions. We keep
No,
on asking.
I haven't used it.
I think we have to make it
One of the friend from Kota Rajasthan is asking, Is there any role of bevacizumab in the cytokine storm therapy?
I think Kumar answered that, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically, yes. Practically, I don't know.
Theoretically, yes, and practically used it, good results.
So, friends, we have come to an end. Very interesting session on the COVID cytokine storm. And now I request all the panelists to give the take-home message for all the audience. Dr. Parvez, what is your take-home message for the audience?
So my take-home message.
Our audience is mainly chest physicians.
So my take-home message is, as we must remember that cytokine storm is a constellation of. It's basically a triad of elevated cytokines, persistent inflammation, and evidence of organ dysfunction. Try to think of it early, intervene early, so that you are able to control the cytokine storm and let not the patient deteriorate.
That cytokine storm is something which we all should know, because we should recognize. One mind doesn't know, eyes doesn't see. So we should recognize from the clinical features, the panel of investigation that are in our hand in the right place. In fact, as rightly told by Dr. Kaul, that all of the people do not have the access to right investigation, but the minimal investigation, at least the NLR ratio, the CRP, and the signs and symptoms, high fever persisting, and the patient becoming toxic. And if we have the right drug, at least steroids are there, anti-IL-6, if we have available, right drugs in the right time is necessary to manage the patient. And ultimately, correction of hypoxia, which we are lacking. We are lacking in managing the oxygen level and the right oxygen therapy that is required. We are thinking of higher drugs, but we are not managing the hypoxia in the right way it should be. That's the only thing we should be aware of.
I think both Kaul sir and Haldar sir have summarized this beautifully. I just want to add one point that, identification of first day of fever. Yeah, that's what my take-home message is. For identification of first day of fever or first day of disease is very important. Don't miss the period between 8 to 15 days. If you mess up that diagnosis of 8 to 15 days by not identifying the first day of disease, you can land into trouble and your patient can land into trouble. And that's where, after missing that train, we start having problems in patients. So don't miss that train.
Dr. Tony, your take-home message for the audience.
Basically, keep a high index of suspicion of which patient based on the other comorbid factors and evaluations as to what to watch for. Also keep a good eye for any cardiac dysfunctions coming up, because that will be the thing that will precipitate the loss of life. And most importantly, every patient will be unique. You cannot put a completely standard protocol for every patient equally. And you will have to look into the nitty-gritty details and modify it along the way. But it's a hard war out there.
I agree with the other panelists. I don't think I have anything extra to add, but I would like to tell the general physicians, please refer to a chest physician fast instead of playing around with patients. So
there's actually a question from one Madhav Davkare from Maharashtra. Most of the patients are becoming dependent on NIV. What should be the best way to weaning such patients from NIV? So that I would like to take that question for the panel itself, to everybody just give opinion as a closing session from pulmonologists. The issue is that there will be multifactorial issues for why the patient may be dependent on the NIV and oxygenation. As Indranil sir said, oxygenation is the most important point. And the issue is with the level of anatomical damage that may have happened with the fibrosis and the disease state, we have to give some time for the lungs to recover. As we normally, in a pneumonia itself, we usually wait for 1-2 months to ensure the entire recovery. In COVID, it's much faster, worse. So they will need a frequent re-evaluation of the oxygenation status, NIV status, and titration along with that, and correction of any other factors. And now, if the patient is becoming dependent on NIV, means if the oxygenation is not being maintained, you have to rule out if there are any other factors like infection or any other diffusion disorder. So even D-dimer should be rechecked for that. And if possible, please ask the pulmonologist nearby to just have a look.
Sorry, a lot of questions are there. We were just not able to take the questions. And the last message which I wish to give to the audience is that be an Arjun. Break this circuit of the cytokine storm. And by making an early diagnosis, early initiation of the treatment, and early supportive care to the patient. I think this is the message which is going to be important to break the chakravyuh created by the cytokine storm or the chest infection. I think with this message, I wish to hand over thanks to the CCI for organizing such a nice program, such a nice webinar, and because we are all benefited, the panelists are benefited and the audience are benefited. We all are.
Definitely. Thank you, sir.
very much.
Thank you so much.
very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
Handing
much.
over to CCI.
Thank you so
CCI,
much. Sir.
please.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir.
CCI, please.